We are live. This is Why Libertarian, coming at you every single Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern. Thank you for joining in. Whether you are watching live or you are watching the recorded version, please like, comment, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, retweet, get this thing out there. We have an awesome guest today. I want to make sure that his message and what he's talking about gets out there and more people can really kind of experience the truth of, just the truth, period. Hopefully, a lot of us can experience a little bit more truth than we've gotten recently. But so it is my pleasure to invite on Magnus Panvidya. Magnus, how's it going, man?
Good. Beautiful day. A lot of, very positive things happening with this whole little thing we're trying to pull off. So kind of top of the world.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. So anyone who's unfamiliar with Magnus is a part of the Boog. Magnus is got Twitter famous pretty quickly by giving a speech on, I believe that was the Capitol steps in Lansing, right? Yep.
And in front of snipers and military helicopters and Humvees and National Guard. It was great.
Yeah. Someone speaking rational truth required a military presence in order to police the situation. That's absolutely fantastic. So I want to remind everyone, if you're watching live, or even if you watch the recorded version, you can always comment and question, and we'll have a conversation afterward. But if you are watching live, we are taking comments and questions live for Magnus if you want to chime in or ask a specific question. So I want to start off with something really quick, Magnus. The media, the corporate media, and their masters have a certain narrative that they're pushing, right? And it's a very convenient narrative, and they lay a ton of this stuff on top of these groups that they are basically threatened by, the Boogaloo being one of them, all right? So I want to run just really quick lightning round through these things and just ask you these questions because I want to get it on the record, because the fact that they're trying to pin this on you is complete BS, all right? So, first one, is the Boog white supremacist?
No, in fact, our largest rally, barely 2/3 of the people there were white, and only half of them were straight, so...
I'd say that answers that question. And then the second question is the Boog anti-LGBTQ, which I think is a resounding no.
Nope. Again, you being a libertarian, we figured out the answer to that question back in the 1970s, long before the Republicans and the Democrats and even some of the fake woke crowd even were talking about it. We had already answered that question.
Truth. Is the Boog anti-woman?
No, I know we have the whole Boogaloo boy thing, but we even tried to make it BOI to kind of dude to make it less neutral. But we definitely have female membership, and there's nothing really it's not even a lot of these issues there isn't even a pro or against. It's just we don't care, which is very much like a libertarian thing. We're relevant, and it only becomes relevant if the government is targeting a group like that. Then of course, then we'll get involved, but like that's not the objective. So
very true, very true. All right, something else that we'll talk about what came out in the Salon article, this hit piece that was written on, for all intents and purposes, digital toilet paper. Are any of these positions intended to be a smokescreen, or are they actually legit?
I don't even know what we would get from the smokescreen. I think that's like the most important question about all of this is they always lay out these grand conspiracy theories, but they never ask like what is there to gain from it. Because if we wanted to, like I've said it on a lot of left-wing podcasts, if we wanted to infiltrate left-wing circles, then we would just dress in all black and then like parrot some generic left-wing Twitter talking points, and you would never know. And if we wanted just like blatant accelerationism, then there's plenty of, you know, right-wing groups that we could have joined. We could have been 3%ers or Oath Keepers or any of these groups, but we didn't. So it's just like, what do we have to gain through smoke screening? How is it that a lot of our members have, you know, years of experience in the LP and as public figures and have stood by everything we said for a very long time, just for what gain, for what benefit, you know? And they never have an answer for that besides just going like, oh, you guys are trying to start a race war. It's like, okay, well, if we were trying to do that, then why would we be going to BLM protests? And they're like, oh, you want to incite violence and riots at the BLM protests. And I'm like, okay, so why are we not doing that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's just
it's just something to throw against the wall that sticks, right? Like it's one of those like fear things. It's like you know what? It's like the public service announcements about marijuana back in like the 80s and 90s, and the kid who's like, oh, I'm so high, and he like, you know, blows his brains out. Like, it's the dumbest thing ever, and you're like, well, you do want that to happen to your kid? And like, the answer is obviously no, but the follow through is always like, well, are the two things connected? They never ask that question. Like, it's never even close.
The old Dare ads of like the girl melting into a couch.
Yeah,
like, yes, your brain on marijuana.
Yeah. All right, last one. Is it the intention of the Boog to start/instigate a civil war?
No, the whole thing is it's been a reactionary movement. Like the original Boogaloo memes were a response to gun control, that the Boogaloo would kick off the moment they went and started the gun, tried to grab the guns. So it's always been defensive, but like they have this playbook when it comes to gun groups. And if you look at almost any single instance with militias in history or even firearm owners, they try to make it seem like they're crazy and that they're on the offensive and they want to do all these things. And then you actually look into the story and they were on the defensive. They weren't doing anything, and the government went and screwed with them, and then they defended themselves. And that's exactly like, you know, what's going on there. It's not a civil war, and like obviously what I'm trying to do is instigate a, you know, people's revolution essentially. But at the end of the day, at the bare minimum, the Boog like idea is we're being attacked. Like they're coming after us, and it's going to eventually get to the point where you put your foot down and do something about it. And that's always like, and even, you know, it's funny when they say like, oh, it's about, you know, like the race war and stuff like that. If you go into Google Images and you just type in Boogaloo memes, because that puts you in a different like Google like section, whatever, and you go read the memes, almost all of them are about like the IRS or the DHS or the ATF. You will struggle to find a single meme that even references race in any of those. And some of those memes are like 4, 5, 6 years old. And then they try to say like, oh, it came out of 4chan. It's about a race war. And it's like, why isn't there a single meme or receipt or document of this besides maybe a handful of, you know, neo-Nazi LARPers on some message board that never walked out into public making jokes or something? It's surreal to me.
Yeah. We had one comment. This looks like one of your boys, maybe. Clarify civil war versus revolution, sides versus top and bottom.
Yeah. What's going on right now is the government wants one or two things. They either want to instigate the left or right to fight each other, so then they can step in and be the savior. Yeah. Yeah, Aaron, very correct. Yeah, they want the two sides to fight each other so they can step in and implement peace, because, you know, extremism is totally out of control, which is what we're already seeing today on CNN with the FBI talking. Or they want to come down top to bottom and crush people. So that's like what I'm trying to explain to people is not only do you have to put the culture war down and put the culture war aside because it's trying to instigate, like the government is never happier in the world than when they see BLM activists and Proud Boys fist fighting in the street. They are smiling and writing checks and bills off the back of that. That's something we have to stop. And they also don't want people to understand that they're making active moves against all of these groups simultaneously while lying up from each direction, saying like, oh, the government's only targeting conservatives. And then on the left, they'll be like, oh, the government's only going after leftists, when in reality, they're crushing all of us.
Yes. Yeah. No, and that's something that it's so tough to figure out the messaging that gets both sides to wake up, right? Like, do you have to come up with messaging that's targeted to either side of that to get them to wake up to that? Or is there some unifying message that can get them to both wake up? And I don't know what the answer is. I've seen tons of people wake up as of recently, which is reassuring, but I'm not even sure if we know kind of like what the special sauce is. I think it's just the government's doing it to itself.
Yeah, it's pretty much it, like, and definitely just pointing out those instances of like the whole idea of the Unity Coalition, and what even got like me personally even, and then a lot of the Boogaloo groups to like, because like we were the same as any libertarian, any even conservative, to where we had very negative viewpoints and opinions on anti-fascist organizations and even some BLM organizations. Not like all of them. We still like the protests and everything, but we believe that some organizations were bullshit. Until the DHS released a memo, and you can go look up an image of this memo, where it had the anti-fascist flag and then the Boogaloo Igloo right next to each other, and it was a memo on domestic extremism in the United States. And that was kind of like a wake-up call for like a lot of us of like, oh God, like, they're coming after both of us, because it was supposed to be a memo on right-wing extremism, yet it included anti-fascist organizations. So it's like,
yes.
And then just like a couple weeks ago, they did the same thing where they were talking about domestic extremism in the United States, and they name dropped BLM organizations, Black Panthers, and anti-fascist organizations. And they quickly tried to backpedal after that, be like, well, we're not saying that they're the same or anything. We're just including them on this list for some reason, Yeah. So it's moments like that where even it got like people in the movement to wake up, and the Unity Coalition started getting birthed out of that. And a lot of like our initial conversations with Antifa and stuff like that were like, hey, dude, like they literally just put it on paper for the whole world to see that they do not view us differently at all. The more that happens and the more that goes on, the more people kind of wake up to like, oh,
Well, so what's funny is like, or not funny, but it's like maybe ironic if I'm using that word correctly, but a lot of what happened during the civil rights movement of the late 60s, I see a lot of the same tactics being used. So like, for instance, this whole like, extremist argument, whether they paint it as far right or far left or whatever, like just extremism. We have to stop extremism. Well, in a world of oppression, freedom is extreme, right? And so one of the things, like, have you ever heard of the Deacons for Defense?
I have not.
Okay, so the Deacons of Defense actually predated the Black Panthers. And the Deacons for Defense were based in Louisiana. And it was essentially a number of black men that took up arms to protect themselves and the people within their neighborhood from essentially the police. And if you can imagine, Louisiana around the civil rights movement, there weren't very many black policemen. In fact, there were none. They were all white police officers, and many of them were aligned with the KKK, which was and still is to this day a white supremacist organization, right? So they took up arms and were looked at as extremists, but they ended up being the first armed, protection for Martin Luther King Jr. and his marches, right? So like, I don't think they were at Selma, but
that's something I get into like arguments with like normie liberals a lot on guns. Is I'm like, Martin Luther King had a gun behind every door at his house. Like Martin Luther King was strapped to the teeth.
He wasn't anti-violence, so to speak. He was anti, offense.
Which is the exact same thing we preach, which is the exact same thing, plenty of other, like even the Black Panthers and stuff like that. Like there's a lot, people cannot discriminate between like, don't come at me and like, I'm going to attack you.
Right.
Which I think is very deliberate in terms of like messaging from the government to kind of, get people. But to your point though, I was even ranting last night of like, I try to make these connections, and once people kind of understand them, they get the main message more of like, if you want to look at what's going on with no-knock raids nowadays, look at the ATF tactics at Waco and Ruby Ridge. And then if you want to wonder where that came from, if Waco and Ruby Ridge, look at what happened with the Weather Underground and the Black Panthers during the Civil Rights Movement. Like, if you don't separate them into two different things and you view it as one big snowball rolling down a hill and just picking different targets at different times, like that's what's going on. That's why I'll go to militia guys and be like, you have problems with BLM, but you don't understand that the tactics being used to target you come from segregation and attacking civil rights movements. And if you're a left-wing person, you have a problem with no-knock raids and the whole Breonna Taylor situation and everything that goes on with that. Look at what the police and the FBI were, training each other to do during the 90s in the anti-militia movements that happened when they were going after the Michigan militia, when they were going after Waco, the branch, like all of these are the same things. They're coming from the same agencies, and a lot of these people are still around. I mean, if you look at, Bill Barr, our attorney general, pro bono represented the FBI sniper from Ruby Ridge. So it's like, and now, he's Donald Trump's, the conservative Donald Trump's, attorney general. It's like,
and those, that's the other thing, is like, it's really hard and it's intentional. What's funny is when they accuse groups of doing things, it's almost always projection. They're always projecting what's actually going on their side of the issue, right? So like one thing that they will try and pin on the Boog is that your messaging is, quote unquote disjointed, and that's that's an important part of it. Like it's an important part of like confusing people so that like it makes you unassuming, or like, the jokes are all like a smoke screen so that like they think that you're funny, but really you're dangerous. And you're like, whoa, hold on. Isn't that the same exact shit that you all do? Like you use like two different words that are the same exact thing, but then you say one group is like great and then they're awful, or you say that, one group is like fighting for racial equality and then and the other hand, but they're also like, extremist and alt-right or whatever. And it's like this double speak 1984 crap. And they project it on groups like the Boog because it's almost like, all right, well, look at them. Like, don't look at us. Like, assume that they're doing it and we aren't. And it's complete, like it's complete misdirection. It's like, which cup is the ball under,
and they'll prop groups up just to turn on them like immediately. You saw, under the Trump administration, his administration was really friendly to the Proud Boys, and now some of his exact appointees that he put in courts are hunting them down. And in the same way that like the Biden administration was super positive to BLM over the election years, is now turning on them and starting to arrest activists and ramp up more police state things on them. This is CIA tactics. We created Al Qaeda, now we bomb Al Qaeda, but now we're just doing it at home.
It's perfect you brought that up. So like we have a libertarian book club. Every single month we live cast. We've done 2 now. The most recent one we did was The New Right by Michael Malice. Tons of awesome stuff in there. I mean, like, some of the stuff that the Boog embodies is addressed in there, like, meme magic and just the idea of kind of like trolling as a means to get people to understand how clown world it is that we're living in, right?
Reason Magazine actually made a great connection that we make a lot of times, that are kind of not our on the ground tactics, but our online tactics very much come from pro-democracy protesters in China and in over, what's all going on over there. Like it's deliberate, and they say it's like smoke and mirrors and everything, but they just can't understand that in the day, like we live in a time now where everything is a giant like political omnibus. If you talk to a group, they have like an opinion on every single subject, and they have an objective for every single subject, and like a preferable outcome on every single subject, to where the Boogaloo is not that at all. Like the Boogaloo is literally just can be boiled down to shit be fucked, yo. Yeah. So like, you can talk to like 100 different members, and each one might be like, you know what, this is more of a problem, or this is more a problem. Right. To where like the unity and the coalition thing that I'm trying to build, and a lot of us are trying to build, already exists within the Boogaloo. Like you have anarcho-socialists next to like, black separatists next to like ANCAPs next to like, conservatives. These are all people in the Boogaloo, and we all stand together with each other because we just assume that like things have gotten so bad and things are hitting this point in this country that if we don't step up and just solve these clear and like obvious problems, it's not going to get any better. So they get really confused on us in our messaging and everything, and saying that we try to be deliberately vague and stuff like that to like deceive, when in reality it's more just that we're not really even a political movement in a sense. We are a reaction to state violence. We are.
Yeah.
That's why I said in that speech that we are antibodies to this. We only exist because things are so bad.
Well, yeah. If they didn't do what they do, y'all wouldn't be needed, right? Like it just wouldn't be necessary. Like that's a completely perfect analogy. And to your point earlier, in terms of like the CIA tactics and everything like that, the next book that we're going over in the book club is Scott Horton's Enough Already. And just talking about the absolute ridiculousness of foreign policy. Like, just look at like Yemen right now, and look at like, well, we were pro the Houthis and then anti the outgoing president, and then or we were with the president and he went after the Houthis, and then he was tossed, and we put in someone more favorable, and then he joined up with the Houthis and came to take things back over. So now we got to pay Al Qaeda to get the Houthis out, right? Who were our buddies in the past, right? And now all of a sudden, like, we're pro Al Qaeda. Now Biden comes in, we turn it back around. You're like, guys, what are we accomplishing here? We do absolutely nothing. It's like
Syria is the perfect example of that. Of we're funding the Kurds one day, we're bombing the Kurds the next day. We're funding the YPG, we're funding all these different groups, and then we're bomb them the next day. And it even got to the point where I think it was either the Time magazine, the Washington Post, one of like the bigger, I don't say centrist, but less like obviously partisan articles, had to write a report where the government admitted that there was CIA funded insurgents getting into firefights with Department of Homeland Security funded insurgents in Syria. So like literally like our own agencies are backed like separate groups that are now fighting each other under our same government. Like, what the fuck?
Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah. And you have tribal groups on either side that are both using U.S. munitions to attack each other as well. So it's like it's it's basically a political foreign policy circle jerk is basically what it is. It's just like you just keep going around the circle and the last person loses. Like that's exactly what it is. But so all right, so I think like we could fill an entire hour on foreign policy, that kind of thing.
Foreign policy all day.
My boy Nick asked, what are your views? I think he's talking about the No Fucking Around coalition.
Okay,
is that what he's talking about?
We have a very interesting history with those guys. So in the very beginning, when they first popped up, we were like, we don't know who these guys are. Maybe they're assets. Maybe they're genuine. They look they look pretty cool. They're like organized and everything. All right, we'll see how this goes. And then we started having conversations with them on. Like I think it was like after their second event, being like, hey, can we come down and talk? Like we already work with Black Panthers, stuff like that. So like we're gonna send down like a UPG, which is our Louisville organization, United Pharaohs Guard. We're gonna send down a UPG guy and talk to Grandmaster Jay essentially. And he was like, even like he had like a public video where he's like, yeah, come down, you're welcome. We'll talk. We'll see if we can get along. And then like when we showed up, they started being really fucking antagonistic with everybody and really weird. And that was the same event where one of their members shot 3 of their other members with a negligent discharge. And like, I just don't know what's going on with them. And then they have like really weird politics that nobody can really hammer down. Like they say that they're not like a crazy like black supremacist organization, but then they do make like really weird statements and stuff like invading Texas and taking over like a third of Texas or something. I don't know. I don't have like a hard opinion one way or another. All I can say on them is that they definitely need to drill them a little bit more and get some finger discipline. And obviously, Grandmaster Jay has made some meme tier worthy idiotic statements about firearms on the internet. So hey, if they want to educate themselves better and prepare themselves better and have a conversation with us, we'll have a conversation with them. But right now they're kind of just fucking embarrassing.
Yeah. Open invite. If they want to get some education, they should hit you up, I think.
It just looked really bad for like black gun ownership, really, of like because it was really exciting to see them in the beginning of like, oh, here's this like all black, like real organized militia. They all look like legit and everything. And then they shot each other and said a bunch of stupid shit. And I was like, oh.
Yeah. Now,
meanwhile, and they got a lot of public attention, a lot of media coverage, while like BLM 757, which is another BLM organization we work with, that's also a militia, and they're armed, like they're way more disciplined. They're way more interesting. They put on events in Virginia all the time, and they got no media coverage. So it's like, fuck.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, it's never the house that has itself in order that gets the majority of the coverage usually, unless there's something else going on, right? Like it's always the train wreck. But so to that point, I have to ask you this question. So, and this comes from a completely neutral standpoint. So. The critique of the Boog is like, oh, well, you've had like 2 or 3 people that went rogue, right? And they did some crazy shit, right? And they want to paint you all with that same brush, okay? What would you say to them if they brought up those either direct or indirect connections to the Boog on the part of those individuals, and how that necessarily kind of works its way back to the broader organization?
Yeah, so I just think that it's a standard that's only applied to us and is not applied to anyone else. A sane and rational person will never look at Bernie Sanders fans and say that the one guy that shot up that Republican baseball game represents all the Bernie Sanders fans. We won't say that the Dallas shooter that killed 5 cops somehow represents all of BLM. We would never say that the John Brown Gun Club guy that attacked an ICE facility represents that. So when you look at raw numbers of how many people in our size of our organization and how many people have done stupid things I disagree with, we have 3 individuals. We have Stephen Carrillo and we have the 2 guys that were involved with the Whitmer shit. Okay. I can say, that was dumb and they shouldn't have been involved with that. But you're talking 3 people in a movement of, tens of thousands, if not more than that, because we'll never.
Not to mention the fact that they never connect the dots. They say these 3 people were associated with this group, but they never connect the dots saying that, like, oh, they had the support of the group, or they like the group helped facilitate these things.
Yeah,
they just said they happen to be members.
Rogue. He didn't talk to anybody and then do anything. And then everyone else, like, they bring up the 3 guys that got arrested in Las Vegas heading to a protest with Molotovs in the car or something like that. Yeah. The FBI was involved. If you believe any situation when the FBI is involved, I don't know what to tell you. There's a lot of things about that.
I have a bridge to sell you.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other one is the 2 men in Minneapolis that got arrested apparently trying to sell illegal silencers to Hamas, which it wasn't even Hamas. It was the FBI pretending to be Hamas, which again, FBI. And then they bring up the individual that was in Minneapolis that fired. It's so hilarious, the articles that are written about this. Like, Boogaloo extremist fires AK-47 at police station that was lit on fire and burned to the ground by rioters. Yeah, and they're clutching their pearls at this one dude who fired a couple rounds into an already burning building.
Yeah.
Totally glossing over the fact that there's pictures of hundreds of people standing in front of the Minneapolis 7th police precinct with their fists in the air while the which again, I'm all about that. Like, I had no complaints with them burning down their police station. Personally, but it's so funny that so I think it might have been Salon even that was no, it was Vice that was freaking out and clutching their fucking pearls over that. And it's
well, no, because it has to do with a gun, and more importantly, it has to do with a gun that's a really bad gun, right? Like, that's the other things. Yes,
scary AK-47.
Yes, yeah. Aaron said we had a whole summer of BLM burning down businesses, injuring, killing, but somehow that's not a comparable issue. I think the point is yes and no, right? Like, the point is it's juxtaposed in that moment to the degree of what's going on, and even if it is true, right? Like, it's like saying that someone spit on the Titanic as it was sinking. Like, it's like the most ridiculous corollary, right?
It's there, and both sides are trying to do the same thing, where they're trying to do that to the Boog, and they're trying to do that to militia groups, and then on the right, obviously, they're doing the same thing with BLM of this is a huge country. There was hundreds of thousands of events, and people keep pointing towards what was going on the coast. Because if you look at what happened in a lot of the actual country, even when there was riots, there was very sparse property damage, and a lot of the property damage that happens, people kind of conflate that to be BLM, where they don't realize that especially if you go to the Kenosha situation, which is what I always point to, the BLM and the anti-fascist activists were down at the courthouse that was a mile down the road, and they were fighting with cops. Meanwhile, you had videos of just random people from the community, which is, unaffiliated. They might yell Black Lives Matter or George Floyd or whatever, but they're doing that because there's a camera pointing at them. They're not there for the protest. They don't care about BLM. They know all the cops are distracted. They're going to go have some fun. especially after like, you know, a year of lockdowns. You have bar fight Kevin that goes to the club every weekend and gets in a fist fight with someone for looking at his girlfriend. Hasn't been able to do that in a year. And they see, you know, a riot going on. So yeah, they're going to go out and get them some Jordans or something. They're going to break into the buildings and screw stuff up. And then BLM gets painted with that. But at the same time, I'll never deny that there were some BLM activists and some anti-fascist activists that did do fucked up shit. But in the same way, I don't want my movement painted by the actions of a minority of idiots. I'm not going to paint their movements with the actions of a minority of idiots. So that's kind of like the whole basis of the unity thing.
Not to mention the fact that, like you said, like, you know, when we're talking about like damage caused by the riots and stuff like that, like no one's like, and here's Omaha, Nebraska, and the entire city's on fire. Like that's not, it just didn't happen, you know. Living in New Jersey, there were some marches and stuff like that, and that was basically it, right? Like now, granted, this is like, you know, this is one of the most liberal states in the entire country. But that being said, it's somewhat homogeneous in that sense. So that's why there wasn't really much of an issue. It's the areas where you had some kind of like, you know, cross-pollination. You know, the reason why Portland's still a thing is because it's actually even farther out on the left. So the conflict isn't necessarily against like far right and far left in Portland. It's like literally, you know, socialists that are burning and destroying things versus like pragmatic left people that are like, let's not destroy things, you know, like
a lot of people forget that there actually is a quite hefty amount of like actual far right, like not like Trumpers, but like actual far right in the Pacific Northwest. Because I've talked to and encountered a lot of these people, and there are people that drive around and throw the sig hail out the window at BLM protesters. There's like on January 6th in Olympia, or it was either Olympia or Salem, they went to the governor's mansion and you had a bunch of armed dudes that were running around and being like, I am a neo-Nazi, I am a white supremacist, and like throwing sig hail and stuff. So that's why Portland's such a clusterfuck, because you have like neoliberal shit libs, and then you have like regular leftists, and then you do have like psychotic, like kill everyone, you know, people. And then on top of that, you have the far right. And on top of that, you have the police, which even though it's a super liberal area, are like psychotically violent up there. Like they go way over the line. And you mix all that into a blender and you get the Pacific Northwest.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like,
No, it is a pressure cooker is basically what it is. I mean, and has been, like, continues to be, basically, you know. If anything, Portland is it is a warning to everyone about when you ascribe to like the opposite of like freedom and liberty and like property rights and the non-aggression principle and things like that. Like that's what you get in Portland, right? Like you get a bunch of different like disparate groups feeling like crabs that have to climb to the top of the bucket and that they have to screw each other over in order to get there, right? Like or I've been getting screwed over by this group, so like it's your turn to be like, you know, bottom of the bucket. Now I'm going to get on top. Yeah. Like that's not it at all. And if anything, it serves as a warning sign to the rest of the country. Like if you continue to not see the common problem that is state control, like that's what it will become. Like we will have that not just in Portland. So let me ask you this question. If now I know like you've used the word libertarian a couple times and things like that. Would you describe yourself as a libertarian? Like your self-prescribed political kind of persuasion? Are you anarchist, ANCAP, and social? Like what would you say you ascribe to?
I have like my political politics, as I'll call, like when I actually participate in the political system, and then I have my personal politics and like what my dream utopia would be. I don't really know what to describe. Like a lot of people have called it like panarchy, and there's like meta-archy, and there's all these weird, you know, words for it. But I essentially like am some weird love child of, you know, Bookchin and Spooner. Bookchin being like, you know, like a communalist Marxist, and, you know, Lysander Spooner being Lysander Spooner. Yeah. So like I kind of pull from both of those. So like maybe like an anarcho-mutualist or something like that. That's my like utopia. And then when it comes to actually participating in politics, I view the LP as like the better path towards that. So I did do armed security for Spike Cohen a couple times during his campaign. I voted for Joe Jorgensen. So like I would like, so electorally, I guess maybe you would call it, I am a libertarian, but personally, I'm definitely more of an anarchist. And there is definitely like a lot of hard critiques I have for like the LP and regular libertarians that they aren't in bad faith. I still love them. They're still my people, you know, but there's definitely things I think we could do a lot better. So
yeah, that is that's a very diplomatic way of putting that. I would say if I am comfortable with the label ANCAP, I'm good with that. I have no problem with like ANCOMs or ANSOCs or mutualists because I'm as long as it doesn't involve force. Like if it's voluntary association, like have fun. Like I really don't care,
Yeah, that's exactly my thing of like I want to, like go to a music festival that's between a anarcho-capitalist like town and then like an anarcho-communist commune, and they're like right next to each other and they just don't fucking bother each other. And if one person wants to leave, then he'll go to the other. And that's actually like why I love Bookshin so much, because Bookshin actually gave a speech at a Libertarian Party conference actually as a Marxist, and he was describing like, I wouldn't mind living under your what you describe as capitalism, which was essentially like anarcho-capitalism or like libertarian capitalism. He said like I wouldn't mind living under that at all. And in fact, if my Marxist anarchy turned authoritarian, I would go and join you and fight against my system to make it more free and more anarchist again. And that's how I feel now. Of like we do live under a corporatist system right now, so. Me as a more libertarian person, I will happily march with anarcho-communists and stuff like that to fight this corporatist system. Yeah, so that's kind of like that's where I'm at. Yeah,
no, that was I respect that. I think that opinion is because a lot of people want to. Again, they fall victim to the same thing. Like when they feel like they're being painted with a broad brush, they then in turn paint others with the same broad brush. And I don't know if it's probably defensive or something like that, but. Yeah, no, that is like I love that perspective. Like communalism, believe me, part of me wants to go live in a like you grew up kind of like in a communal upbringing, like an atmosphere, right?
Yeah. Obviously, like my family wasn't a part of it, but I lived next to the commune, and I would go to the commune all the time, and they were Wiccan, like lesbian, anarcho-communists. That's who I grew up with. So like from that to like doing armed security for Spike Cohen. That is my weird fucking character.
That's like, so like you want to talk about like the Overton window and stuff like that. Some people's political arc is like this, right? Like your political arc is like
I've joked that I've essentially made like a giant like V from like growing up around anarcho-communists, then like becoming like a borderline tanky in college, and then shooting all the way down to like right-leaning anarchism, and then bouncing like even a little bit more left to like the weird like middle ground mutualist position I am. So.
I appreciate that because there's nuance there, and it's like I think people like again, it's just like the convenience and speed of being like are you red or blue? Like that's what it is. It's like and to draw on a parallel, like I don't know if you like stand-up comedy. Did you ever listen to like George Carlin or anything? That?
A giant Carlin fan.
Carlin's fantastic,
Carlin
was
perfect too, because Carlin was post-partisan. He was post-political.
He would crap on everyone.
Yeah, he was just literally like everything is fucked, and if we don't solve these problems, and that's like the most important thing to me is. People are unwilling to take out their own garbage on the either side. A lot of people in the shit lib left, as they're called, or like the blue MAGA, as the leftists I've known, like a lot of the more socialistic programs that we have in this country are broken. They can be fixed. They don't have to go away to make my libertarian self all happy, and they don't have to be abolished. But for them not to be abolished or go away, then you need to put energy into them to fix the problems within them. But they don't want to do it. They don't want to talk about the teachers' unions. They don't want to talk about problems with like Social Security and stuff like that. And then on the right, like we all know that there's big issues with policing, with the military complex, with, a lot of the more conservative sacred cows. But they don't want to address those issues. And now we're all the way to abolish the police. And it's like, well, we don't have to abolish the police if you guys just actually cleaned up your own house. But through this culture war stuff, you're seeing like anti-government militias backing the cops, and you're seeing like left-wing activists cheering on the FBI. It's like whoa.
Yeah. Well, no, we just
so
had
dangerous.
that.
It's really
so
dangerous.
like it's really weird the lines that are getting drawn now, and it's almost like kind of. Like this might be glass half full thinking, but it's like the system is set up in such a way now where just your enemy tomorrow could be your friend, the day after, and the things that people like, just the number of like thin blue line people that have been like, wait a minute, why are you like defending these people who I think like stole the election or whatever? And it's like, it's really causing them to have this kind of like short circuit where they're like, whoa, like everything that I assumed to be correct for, however many years, 20, 30 years of me being an adult and voting and identifying as a political ideology is like completely blown out of the water now, because it's like, wait a minute, like I've been lied to, or, this shit's been happening all along. And you're like, yeah, well, where you been? Right. Like
that's kind of like where the concept of the Boogaloo was even born out of, was one of those, moments of realization of our organization. Like in the very beginning, before we developed to the more complex thing we are now, like I said, it was a gun control thing. But the reason why the Boog formed outside of the traditional right-wing militias is the traditional right-wing militias were pro-cop. And if you go talk to any Boogaloo person, all of us hate the police because who's going to come take that gun?
Yeah,
the cops. And all of like the 3%ers and stuff like that will be like, the cops will uphold their oath to the Constitution, while the Boogaloos are like, no,
they won't. They want to get paid.
Whatever they want to do.
Yeah, well, they like to eat, right? Like that's the thing. Like, and that's the justification. I think that also goes with the self-policing thing, right? Like, so to almost sound redundant, right? Like, whether it's politics or whether it's like, your role as a servant of the state, which by the way, the police is almost like its own political entity unto itself, right?
Especially with the unions and all the nonsense that goes on with them.
Yeah, and so, that self-policing thing really kind of it is emblematic of what happens within, police culture. And just, what happens if you are like, one of the good cops that blows the whistle, and what happens to you? Like, they make an example of you. Like, that's exactly what happens.
That's the whole conversation I had with Alex Jones of like he's like, I'm not anti-cop, and I'm like, I'm not explicitly anti-cop either, but I'll tell you what, a lot of the good cops don't have jobs no more.
Yeah.
They get fired, they get bullied out, they get harassed, they lose their pensions, and a lot of them just quit. So now like they even talking about it on Tim Pool and stuff like that on more mainstream, that a lot of the newer cops are bottom of the barrel people that they hired just out of desperation, and they don't give a damn about the Constitution, don't give a damn about your rights, they don't give a damn if you're black, brown, white, whatever. They're gonna put their boot on you. Oh yeah. And that's like, I'm glad to see some of the more conservative types waking up to this, because that's kind of the foundation of this movement, was just because I always bring it up, but our kind of forming point where we went from just like a meme into like an actual like on the ground thing was the murder of Duncan Lemp in Maryland. Yep. And we tried to go out and have a protest about it. And all the time you hear the traditional conservative talking point of like, why don't you guys protest or riot when a white person is killed by the cops? And it's like, we tried. We went out and had a protest for Duncan Lemp, and there was like 30 people there, and they were all libertarians and anarchists. There wasn't a single conservative there, and that was a gun owner. Duncan Lemp was a 3%er too. So literally, like, one of their own got killed by the cops, and they couldn't even show up to protest for him. Yeah. So that was like we were like, okay, fuck this, we're gonna go make our own thing. We're gonna wear Hawaiian shirts and be weird and like. Who
was the black guy who, I think it was in Texas, he got pulled over? He even announced that he had the firearm legally in the car.
God, why am I blanking on his name? I know who you're talking about.
Like the messaging.
He had a legitimate concealed carry license, and they shot and killed him.
Like completely, and he even announced to them. He was like, "Look, it's in the glove compartment." Yes, like when Philando gets killed, the messaging out of the right was the pro 2A right was. It was either nothing, or it was like this boot-licking, like throw up in your mouth bullshit. It was like,
he went about it the worst way possible, like blah, blah, blah. And it's like the cop was having a fucking anxiety attack the moment this dude said he had a gun.
Yeah.
That's a problem that's going to be used next. That's like, you're going to be that guy eventually. Whether you want to admit it or not, at some point in your life, you're likely to be in the same position as Philando Castile, whether you're white or not. So
do you use the word FUD?
Oh, I love the word FUD.
Yeah.
FUD. And I use it. I use it beyond just the 2A thing. I also describe it to like the anti-marijuana, the very like conservative types that are pearl clutchy, McCulture, don't,
Yeah.
the foot loose types, no dancing in my town kind of people. I call them FUDs too, because it's
fun. Just no fun.
Fun.
All right. So we had a couple of laughs. We have to address this hit piece that Salon put out here.
Yeah,
so
we've been having such a good time. And
I know. I don't want to bring it down, but like we can bring it back up again afterward. But maybe we can laugh a little bit shitting on Salon. But so I just a couple of quotes that stuck out at me. First of all was. I'm sure. Did you read most of it? Or
I read the first one. I couldn't read the second one because I was just so
okay. So the one I looked at, like I've just highlighted some quotes here, and I feel sorry for anyone who reads this at face value and internalizes it because
for anyone who's listening, I will mind you that there is not a single screenshot, there is not a single image, there is no copy and paste. There is, and even the main source is an unnamed individual who refuses to identify themselves. So,
I gotta go back. I gotta go back to the top. Hold on. I gotta throw. Fuck Sam. Okay. I gotta throw that back up here. All right. Whoever Sam is, if Sam actually exists, Sam, you know you done wrong, right? All right. So the two of the quotes. Okay, 2 paragraphs, but like one breath and then the next breath. The Boogaloo's threats of violence must be taken seriously, even if the movement's ideological wrapping is purposefully confusing and the package within it is ultimately empty. Okay, so that's the one breath. And then the very next breath is Boogaloo members will almost certainly never lead or spark a violent revolution or cause the destruction of the state. So what are we even fucking talking about? That's 2 sentences. I did not edit, like right next to each other.
They're super scary, but they have no chance.
Yeah. So why is this a thing? Like, why do we care? Completely ridiculous. What was the other one? The movement is decentralized and politically diverse ecosystem. Fantastic. That sounds amazing. Like that's
the thing is like the article isn't totally bullshit. It's just that the parts that are nonsense and their source in particular and what they try to extrapolate from it is often bullshit. Because I know another one, they make a reference that we don't actively recruit. No, we don't actively recruit. We're not running around asking people to join the Boogaloo. If you want to be a part of this, sure. And a lot of times people ask me like, well, how do I get involved? What do I do in my area? And I'm like, none of us knew. We just did it. And it's the same thing with you. Like, this isn't an organization. This isn't the Proud Boys. This isn't like, there's no chapters. We're the people in our groups that run together, like the Michigan crew that I run together with, that's like 30 guys. We're all good friends. So like, that's the whole thing of like, there's a lot of factual details within the article. It's just the framing around them is nonsense. And the fact that they try to pretend that they got this information from this secret source that was a tell-all, when we have I have my UVA podcast, and then there's Mike Bobby. He runs the Liberty podcast that's been going for like 2 years now, has had every single major member of the movement, anyone who's been popular at any time, anyone who's known from the entire country, and we get blackout drunk and super stoned and just openly talk about everything. We talk about our private signal chats, we drop names, we tell them what our plans are, like, because it's not some crazy spooky shadowy cabal. We're not like planning like blow up police stations or anything. Like that's not what this is. So I almost feel like whoever wrote this article just watched a bunch of my podcasts and then maybe some of Mike Dunn's podcasts and then just like fused them together into one entity and then like pretended it was a source. Yeah, no,
the creative part of the journalism on this is absolutely fantastic. Before I get back to the article, so Aaron has a story. I got pulled over. A cop saw my out-of-state concealed carry permit, freaked out, pulled his gun, called for backup, no weapon, just the permit. Just the piece of paper they were that afraid of.
Yeah, so Mr. Conservatives of, Philando Castile was a criminal and he smelled like weed and he should have just listened to the cops. Aaron ain't black. Aaron didn't do nothing wrong. Aaron didn't even have a fucking gun on him. So
Yep. And Aaron, by the way, I don't know if he's still on, but Dan, if you're still on from Blue Star Union, try and hook up with Aaron and get him on the show. Blue Star is like a nonprofit and they do Second Amendment type stuff.
Aaron's a good dude. He's part of. He's actually one of the boys. So
Dan from Blue Star is going through. He's going to have a full kind of saga of trying to get a concealed carry permit here in New Jersey.
Oh God.
And just it's not even. So here's the ridiculousness as kind of an aside, real quick. The ridiculous in New Jersey is the fact that it's technically still allowed. But the problem is, I think like only 900 people in a state with like 10 million have a concealed carry permit. So that just goes to tell you, and like the vast majority of them are, retired law enforcement. So that just goes to show you, like, it's technically not. Like, they use the system to stop you from being able to do something that's obviously legal.
Yeah,
right?
Like, a lot of people were confused on why so many states were pushing for permitless concealed carry when it's like, well, you already have shall issue, like they already have to give you it. So what's the problem? And it's like, because they make the process to get it just this Byzantine fucking labyrinth that you have to go through that could take years and years and a bunch of money, and you still don't even get a permit. So that's why a lot of states are pushing to just constitutional carry.
When he tells that story, like the bureaucracy and then just the fuckery that happens throughout that entire process is like you can't even imagine the ineptitude and then all of the planned and unplanned ineptitude that's built into the system, so that you can't even even get a yes or no. Like they just hope that you get tired and go away, or that you just don't follow up. And
it's so funny because they accidentally like red pilled Tim Pool on firearms, because he's also in New Jersey and he went and tried to get a gun, and he had to see firsthand the process you have to go through to get a gun in New Jersey, and he was like, wow, maybe these 2A people are onto something. And now he's having like Phoenix Ammunition and shit and like Control Pew on his show talking about printing guns. It's like, good job, New Jersey.
Yep. Yeah. I threw Blue Star's web address into the chat. So Aaron, if you want to go on the show, definitely hit them up, talk to Dan. I think it's a fantastic show. All right. So more of this salon BS. You have a shared agenda which aspires. So again, one sentence: decentralized and politically diverse. But at the same time, you also have a shared agenda which aspires to foment. Which I had to look it up because I know a couple of words, but that was like a $2 word. It means instigate or stir up. So we've already talked about how you're not going to instigate or cause a civil war, but then 2 paragraphs later, literally 2 paragraphs later, instigate or stir up violent revolution. Like. What the fuck? Like we just said, like they might try to, but it's hollow so that they won't. But then they might. Like what?
Journalism.
Yes, yeah. I'm like
someone else pointed out, he was actually someone who follows me on Twitter. He's a copy editor for a newspaper, and he said that article gave him a stroke. The amount of grammatical errors, spelling errors, punctuation errors. Like,
and apparently y'all will happily kill anyone in your way, which is also like it's like that
was something else I wanted to bring up from that article. Of their source said that he had to remain unidentified because the people he worked with would kill him if they knew we talked.
That was right at the beginning. It was right at the beginning. Like, say whatever the hell you want. I don't care.
I'm talking to the media all the time. Caboose in the chat talks to the media all the time. Mike Dunn talks to the media all the time. We have a public podcast where everyone comes on and we talk to the media.
Yeah.
It's preposterous. It's preposterous.
No, it's completely ridiculous.
No, we're not the mob, dude. Like, you can talk to the press. We're not going to fucking kill you. And in fact, like we had a thing happen in Ohio where one of the Ohio Boogaloo boys essentially like panicked and flipped to the cops, and we're giving them information. And you know what we did in the Signal chat? We said, fuck you, dude, and then removed him from the Signal chat.
Yeah.
And he's living his life happily ever after. Like no. So that was the point.
And he was never heard from again.
No. Yeah, that's the point where I knew the article was total bullshit, because the amount of like LARPing and like no.
Yeah.
I've never even seen a fist fight between Boogaloo boys, let alone like executing a member for speaking to the media. Like, it's so ridiculous.
Absolutely ridiculous.
Even Black Panthers and like even like Antifa cells, like they don't like attack members who flip on them. They just kick them out.
Yeah.
That's
they're not drug dealers, and they're
it's not
also
a criminal enterprise.
and they're also not the CIA. That's what the CIA does. Again, that's the other thing is like projection, right? Like if this was a member of the state, they would be worried that you would be telling things that were actually, what the public should not be hearing. So yes, then you will get black-bagged and murdered. But so the rest of the article just goes through and talks about all of these things that, quite frankly, the author just doesn't understand. And the reason why they don't understand is because they're coming at it from this traditional stereotypical view of they see you giving the speech or they see most of the boog and they're like, okay, fatigues, firearms, beards for the most part, right? And they're like, okay, automatically I'm going to assume what's coming out of these people's mouths is anti-Semitic, anti-gay, anti-black, whites are the only, people in the world that need to exist and should have power or whatever. And then all of a sudden someone like you opens your mouth and says sensible stuff. And it's like the gears just grind to a halt. And now they have to go back and as opposed to printing the truth, they have to go back and essentially creatively rationalize their perspective and why it doesn't compute with what you're saying and what you're embodying, right? The complete ridiculousness of that, and just the Eric D. July calls them NPCs, right? Like non-player characters. And so when the programming goes awry, they just they short circuit and can't do anything, right?
They've definitely been chasing us this whole time because in the very beginning they just ignored us and didn't say anything about us. And then when we started showing up to BLM events, then they're panicked and put out just a bunch of rapid fire smears of just unsolicited, unsourced, uncited, oh, they're a white supremacist organization. And then when that that was a pain in the ass for us to deal with because we were already in with a lot of these organizations and suddenly we had to explain ourselves and fight this and it didn't work out and a lot of people disavowed us, but we started building back and then that's when they actually started talking to actual extremist experts and people that actually follow us and were in spying on our groups and things like that. And every single one of them are no, they're not white supremacists. Every single one. If almost every single one of these articles directly cite JJ McNabb, who is a Washington state extremist expert that works with the federal government and studies extremist groups. And she had a giant long Twitter thread where she got so much shit where she's like, I have followed these guys for a year. I'm in all their chats. I'm telling you, the vast majority of them are not white supremacists.
Yeah.
Then they're like, oh, well, that's when the Civil War shit started. They tried white supremacists, then all of a sudden Civil War. That's when they hit that. They're trying to instigate violence. They're trying to go to these BLM events to cause chaos. And here, look at this dude who shot a rifle at a burning police station. And and the whole time they're 4 steps behind us, trying to chase us. And then their hustle really got fucked up when Jimmy Dore put me on his show.
So I want to ask you about that. So I saw your speech before you went on Jimmy's show. And then when you went on Jimmy's show, I kind of knew what you were going to say, but his reaction was, I think, the best thing. It was absolutely amazing. My question to you is, do you think he legitimately knew what you were going to say? Was he prepped ahead of time or was he completely caught off guard?
Oh no, I've had the Jimmy Dore conversation 300 times in America over all the events I go to as even though we are 3% on average of the voting population, millions and millions of people, the third largest political party in the United States, nobody knows what a fucking libertarian is. Yeah. Nobody knows what we believe. They don't know our basic principles. They're like, "Oh, you guys are pro marijuana legalization, but you also love guns." What? Yeah. Never. Yeah. It's we make shirts about it. We've been around for a while. So I do think that Jimmy Dore is just genuinely never talked to a Dave Smith or a Ron Paul or whatever. And if they do think of libertarians, they think of someone like Rand or, more of the traditional Republican libertarian leaning people and not the actual libertarian people that are, weed smoking, gun shooting, police hating, anti-war activists. So when I explained because what I described to him, all the questions he asked me of are you anti this? Are you pro this? Blah, blah, blah. And you go through it. It's they get so shocked and surprised when that's, ask any single libertarian. Walk through an LP convention and ask every question Jimmy asked me, and you're going to get the same exact answer from almost every single libertarian.
Well, you hit on the perfect reason why, like, even if Jimmy, listens to Dave Smith or whatever, and he listens to what he has to say, right? Jimmy is going to be less floored because of just the way Dave looks, right? I think it's the juxtaposition of everyone trying to lump the Boog in with all of these I'm going to use quote unquote alt-right because some of them do have alt-right leanings and some completely do not, right? But they're all trying to lump you together because of essentially aesthetics, which is disingenuous on their part because the majority of the time they're going, well, you can't judge someone by the way that they look, and then they turn around and judge you guys by the way that you look. It's even funnier
because we deliberately make our aesthetics look different than traditional. Like we wear Hawaiian shirts, and we have goofy memes on our patches, and yes. One of the guys I walked to the Lansing Capitol was dressed in full Soviet officer gear. Like he had a jacket and like a Car 98 and a Soviet officer's cap. Like we're deliberately ridiculous because we want to break this association. And they pull. I go back and forth of whether they're just stupid or it's intentional. But I look at a lot of articles and it will be like far right militia, and then they'll actually it'll be talking about 3%ers, but they'll take an image from a Boogaloo event and put us up there. And I'm assuming they just Googled white guy with gun and pulled it and threw it. And then at the same time, they'll take pictures. Famously, there's this one of these 4 guys at a Donald Trump rally.
Yeah.
None of them are wearing Hawaiian shirts. None of them have Boog patches. None of them identified as Boogaloo, but they took that image and put it on the article about the Boogaloo boys. Yeah. So they literally do just throw these groups in a blender and then just assume they're all the same. And you can kind of go back and forth on whether they do that on purpose or whether they are just lazy, dumb journalists. And they're like, oh, I need an image for my article. Just Google militia and then go to the 5th Google image search, grab it and throw it on the headline of the article.
Yeah. No, I think without knowing the inner workings, so take it for what it is, but it seems like it's a combination of both. It seems like there's a handful of people in each one of these organizations, like Gamergate brought that to light, right? So there's a handful of people in these organizations that know the narrative that they're looking for, right? And then they have a bunch of people below them in the hierarchy that, for lack of a better phrase, are not free thinkers. They're like, they'll do what they're told, right? And so, whoever it is, whether characters. Well, yeah, I mean, they're basically just interchangeable cogs, right? And so they basically tell them I need a story on the Boog that ends in this tagline or whatever, or has this tenor to it. So the person writes it, and then what they do is they go to the editor, and then the editor pushes it even further in that direction because it's a world of clicks and we need to go viral on every story and all this other stuff. So civically minded Americans give speech on the State House steps does not drive clicks, right? It just doesn't, right? So I think it's a combination of both. But do you feel that being able to shatter those stereotypes in the public venue helps? And there's a follow-on to that. What's the next step? Just the shock value is good, but then what's the step after that can really kind of improve things?
Just keep doing exactly what we're doing. I mean, Caboose is in the chat. He's the one who put on the anti-ice event, which they called was fake and smoke and mirrors. Go ask the dude who put it on. He's right here. He's talked to media. But, a lot of people are watching that and they're like, why are they protesting ICE? I thought they were far right white supremacists. Don't they want these people in these cages? And it's the more shocks that happen, that's important. But it's also what I do a lot is it's really funny that they accuse me of trying to cozy up to the left when what I spend more time doing nowadays is trying to get the libertarian, the LP types, to not just knee-jerk helicopter communist opinion, essentially. Hey, there's people on the left that aren't psychotic in all these right-wing talking points, and I guarantee you I can take you down to a BLM event. If you actually hear someone from BLM talk, your mind would be blown. In the same way that me personally, my mind got blown when I actually talked to an anti-fascist activist. Because you notice that they never allow them to actually speak in front of a camera.
They never do.
Never.
Yeah.
You'll never actually hear a direct statement from someone in an anti-fascist organization. I went and talked to a lot of these people, and I was like, holy shit, like y'all believe in what a lot of the things I believe in, and most importantly, I love you, Caboose. Yeah, even his profile is from that event. So like, but I pointed out that I got another viral moment where I commented on the ATF memorial post about Waco, and I'm telling because I know there's a bunch of libertarians watching this. I'm telling you that meme making fun of the ATF and calling them murderers had about 2,000 likes on it, and maybe 700 of them had hammers and sickles in their profile.
Yeah.
So like there is common ground in between the left and right, and they don't want you to see all the things you agree upon. So yeah. I've just been more and more trying to facilitate conversations between these, and like I blew Alex Jones's mind when I had Star, which she's part of Portland AFA. She was at the Chaz, everything that goes on in the Pacific Northwest. She's that Antifa. Yeah. And I brought her on Alex Jones, and they were talking about like WTO riots and the new reset and like the new world order and everything. And like, if you didn't know who Alex Jones was and didn't know that she was Antifa, you would have been like, oh, these people are, in the same political spectrum. When she's an anarcho-communist and he's Alex Jones. So, So just continually keep trying to have moments like that and try to like get these groups to actually talk to each other and focus on what they agree upon over what they disagree upon. Because, I follow tons of people on like the far left and tons of Marxists and stuff like that on Twitter. And if I wanted to be the usual like 2020 political activist, then I could have a million arguments. I'd go in and be like, your opinion on this is stupid, and that's not how this happened, and blah, 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 and get into all these right versus left arguments with them. Yeah. But instead, I'm just posting about stuff we all consider bad, and it's building kind of a coalition around that. And that's the same thing in the Boogaloo of like, we have pro-Constitution libertarians alongside people like me that are like more Lysander Spooner people that think the Constitution's bullshit. But we don't talk about that. Like, the point isn't to hammer out disagreements. It is to exclusively focus on problems that we both already agree upon.
Yes. Yeah.
Even like the modern, like, there's a lot of emphasis put on like, oh, we need more debates and we need more discussions over issues and stuff like that. We're kind of getting there now. Yeah. Or even I'm like, no, that's not it at all. Like, I don't even want to have a conversation with a socialist about free healthcare. Let's just talk about something else. Let's talk about the police state. Let's talk about foreign wars, because there is no argument there. And if we take all the energy in the 2-hour conversation we'd have screaming at each other about healthcare and put that into setting up an anti-war march or something, what's going to be more productive?
Yes. Yeah. I agree with you. I think that's something that we definitely have. I say we. There's like in the vein of
you're a fan of the royal
Spooner,
we. Okay.
In the vein of Spooner. There is no we. Mike Ruffo, if he's watching or he's not watching, would totally be saying that to himself right now. But there needs to be a better job done in terms of finding that common ground and then focusing on those issues. Like right now, the qualified immunity issue is a huge thing. It should have been done 9, 10, 11 months ago when, the George Floyd incident happened and everything like that.
It's dead on the floor pretty much. Co-sponsored by Republicans and Democrats, anti-police bill, dead on the floor. Nobody's talking about it.
What's crazy is I saw a post today about how like, oh, well, these Democrats are still championing it. And there's not a collective will on the part of the political party that campaigned to fix these problems to actually fix them. So everything that you need to know, but the problem is people have such a short attention span when it comes to politicians not leaving them wanting, right? And it's on to like, all right, well, the next election cycle, we're on to the next issue, and you're like, well, you screwed me over on that one. Okay, well, we'll fix this one, the one that's coming up. Like, don't worry about that, But we definitely have to do a better job on that in terms of like, finding that common.
And I'm seeing it growing just for the fact of how much the left right now is holding Joe Biden's feet to the fucking fire. And then that's just the general left. Then you go to the left that I work with, and they go as far as hating like AOC and like the Squad and like the Social Democrats of America. Like they're holding them to a fire of which to a degree I never even saw Barack Obama being held to the fire. So it's like, this is happening. Like this is building.
Yeah. His saving grace was, he had the identitarian backswell of being the
Right.
first, black president. So he got a lot of room, right? He was also a junior senator, so a lot of people are saying, "Oh, he's just kind of getting into it," and that kind of thing. I think you saw the tail end of his second administration. People started to wake up.
Yeah, that's what I said. Like the first two, and that's the other thing I tell a lot of the BLM activists, particularly the younger ones, is like, I've been an activist almost my entire life. You don't remember the first wave of BLM protests, the ones in 2014, 2013, under Obama, where it took days and days and days of nationwide rioting for the National Guard to be deployed under Donald Trump, which this isn't a defense of Donald Trump or anything. If you look at Obama, like, you will see pictures of day one of the Michael Brown riots in California, cops with MRAPs and live ammunition rolling down the street, like tear gassing kids, shooting rubber bullets, like infinitely worse. And they pretended that this situation was going to get better under him when that was under Obama.
Yeah.
And Obama did like more for, like, did worse for like the general melanated population than any other president in my lifetime, because people gloss over the fact that he brought back open air slavery in Libya by bombing Libya. Like, black people are being sold at public auction because of Barack Obama. So it's like the worst president that I could imagine in my lifetime.
Yeah, and he got a pass for the beginning, at least to the people that wanted to believe in him, right? His second tour, I think towards the end, he started to appropriately, I mean, not even appropriately, he wasn't even close to what he should have been getting in terms of the skepticism and kind of the calling him on what he's been doing. But, neocons are neocons. Like, it doesn't matter whether you're right, you call yourself right or left. I mean, when you believe in authoritarianism, all you know is the boot. Like, that's all you know.
That's why I said, like, the neo-libs and the neocons are post-political. Like, they're old. Their dream is a, like, technocratic oligarchy. Like, so they don't care about any rights. They don't have a stance on any opinion. They'll say whatever they have to say and give the sheeple whatever crumbs they have to in terms of civil rights, or, we'll paint rainbow flags on the side of police cars, whatever you need, as long as you let us maintain our oligarchy. And that's that's other things that get into arguments with people. People on the right are like, oh, they just want socialism and communism. And then the people on the left are like, oh, they're authoritarian capitalists. And I'm like, no, they're above our petty political squabblings. They want to be kings in their castles, which is on a totally different political axis than left to right. They would be happy in a fascist state. They'd be happy in a, like, corporatist state. They'd be happy in a communist state, whatever allows them to keep their power and whatever they have to do to build their power. So it's not nearly as, and a lot of people try to push that because they want to seem like their particular political ideology is the most oppressed, and thus, conservatives are being stomped on, or socialists have been always oppressed throughout history, but we're the only ones. No one else is, just us. Yeah. Which, that's a grift. It's always
there's tons of grifts going on. Speaking of grifts, my one buddy Dan from Blue Star is asked Magnus, how would he recommend 2A activists in deep blue states fight for carry outside of the ballot box, right? The whole, like, vote harder thing doesn't really work in blue states when it comes to 2A. What would you say the plan of attack should be there?
Open and public civil disobedience. At some point, you have to stop worrying about getting arrested. You have to stop worrying about facing criminal charges. You have to stop worrying about what's going to happen to you, because the voting just isn't happening. So get 100 people, get a bunch of SBRs with armor-piercing ammunition and body armor and, every illegal thing in your blue state that you're not allowed to have, and go march down to the police station. Because, like, that's just... As at some point, like, you can't vote your way out of it, and you don't want, like, not only do you don't want, but it's not going to accomplish anything going all like Rambo and shooting people. That's obviously stupid. So between those extremes, you just have to be willing to sacrifice some things. You have to be, almost every successful political, like, event in our history came from a whole bunch of people sitting in jail and getting fined and getting fucked with by the cops, because that's what it requires. Like, civil disobedience is how you solve things. Or even in Virginia, they passed a local ordinance that you couldn't open carry by their Capitol building because of all of the open carry events that were going on with Black Panthers and Boogaloo Boys and everybody that was happening in Virginia around the gun rights clusterfuck that's happening there. And Black Panthers and local 3%ers and even Proud Boys and Boogaloo Boys just got their guns and walked right up to the Capitol building and even brought signs that said no open carrying allowed. Like they made their own and then shot them full of bullet holes and then went out and replaced the signs with it. and a couple people did get arrested from that. But at the end of the day, it brought up pressure. And that's the same thing that like BLM does. That's the same thing with like environmental organizations, that if you want to be, it's hard for conservatives because they don't have it in their DNA like the left does. Like, obviously I was a trained environmental activist, so like I know how this goes. Yeah. They want to like respect law and order and like civility and all that, being right wing. And at some point you just have to understand that like you have to break the law, and you can break the law in a way that doesn't hurt anybody, but you're going to have to break the law. Oh yeah. And
no, there is a deep gun culture in New Jersey. The problem is, like, you know, the FUDs and the boomercons that are, you know, like you said, they revere the process and they think they just have to, you know, work within the process harder to, you know, to get things better. Whoever wakes them up and gets them going in the right direction. To your point, like Dave Smith said the other day, he was like, look, Republicans, when they say things, are disingenuous. Like, they say things that sound good and maybe even they think they believe in, but they never really follow through. Like, it's just kind of lip service. When someone on the left says something like, we're going to get $15 minimum wage, like, they believe in their core, like, I will get $15 minimum wage passed. Like, the same thing applies to anything else. And you're right, like, any of these kind of, you know, more right of the aisle issues, look, if you are right-leaning and there's like a 2A issue or something else, the only answer is civil disobedience, right? Like, laws only change after culture does. It never precedes it. Like, there has never been a time in human history where, like, you know, the government was like, oh, we need a cultural change. We're going to pass this law and tomorrow everyone's going to, you know, change their behavior.
Politics are downstream from culture.
Exactly. Always. Yeah. It's you know, by the time it becomes a law, like, it's already done. Like, why even make it a law? Like, that's one of the arguments I have for anarchism is, look, you don't need the law. You just need to change the culture. Like, that's the point. Like, by the time you get to the point where there's a law, like, everyone's doing it anyway. You know, like, it's redundant. You know,
that's definitely the thing. Is just, you know, 3D print guns, you know, handguns out. Like, they just did one of the other events we did, the Boogaloo event, and it was a Libertarian Party event as well, was we went down to Austin, Texas, and we had a medical freedom event. And you know what we did? Wide open in the public for all to view, and we filmed ourselves doing it. We illegally sold insulin to people.
That's awesome.
For under the market price, unregulated, like hundreds of dollars less than insulin, and we just walked around and just sold insulin to people. And they easily could be arrested for all of that, but, you know, we also had rifles. But at the same time, like, you might hear a week later that one of those guys gets arrested because he was on video selling insulin. But people see that, and people start to go like, oh, wait, you were arrested for just walking with a gun? You were arrested for selling insulin to people that didn't have money? Like, and they start to question, like, they see state violence happening on someone who doesn't deserve it. And things kind of start to click in their head. And, you know, that's like obviously yesterday was Waco Day, so we keep talking about it. But like Waco, like, the Branch Davidians weren't good people, and David Koresh was a horrible, awful person. But at the same time, like, what happened to them, like, essentially created the militia movement. So that goes, like, so if you're a good person and you're not some crazy cult leader or pedophile, and people watch state violence happen on you, that's what gets people's, you know, gears going. All the BLM protests, like, in the beginning, people weren't really, they still were like in the Michael Brown days of, like, not being, you know, being suspicious towards BLM, until they saw the cops just, like, drive by pepper spraying crowds and, like, shooting a kid holding up a boombox in the head with a rubber bullet. And then people are like, oh, like, maybe there's something going on here. That's kind of like what. Well,
it's like this. It's the same thing as the LGBTQ movement that happened, you know, I mean, throughout the country, but mostly, say, like, in San Francisco, like, you know, with Harvey Milk and everything that happened out there. Like, what became apparent was these were people that look like you and I, and, you know, the cops are cracking their skulls, and you're like, or they're throwing them in prison or trumping up charges, and you're like, wait a minute, like that could be me, and that's really kind of what ended up pushing that in the direction of, at least the beginnings of some level of equality for those people, or at least escaping the oppression that they were under.
And I mean, a lot. I have a very spicy opinion as well. Like, I don't think this should apply to 2A, but in general, of riots do work. And I wholly agree with Thaddeus Russell. He does the Unregistered podcast. He did the Renegade History of the United States. That almost every single major change in America came off the back of a riot. Now, obviously, I don't want private businesses, I don't want private individuals hurt, but when it comes to people versus police, he brings up the example of, you had Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and Malcolm X in Selma, he was doing his thing. He was marching the kids past, the school and getting arrested. But separate from that, you had Malcolm X's people that heard over the black radios that there was a protest downtown. They showed up and fought with cops and beat the shit out of a lot of cops. And there was rocks and bricks and Molotovs, and like chaos, violence. And Martin Luther King from inside the jail literally wrote, like, you can have me, the peaceful, integrated black people, or you can have those black people. And those rioters gave the civil rights movement leverage to the government to be like, oh, maybe we actually should do something about this, because we're going to lose control if not. And that's the same thing that goes towards like all this, of that the pure peaceful protest crowd don't understand that, like, not only will the government always come out to stop you if it gets too successful, they will beat you, they will club you, they will hose you, but that if you don't fight back, you have no leverage to make change. And a lot of people, will say like, oh, the BLM protests caused all these riots and stuff like that, to where, what are they supposed to do? Like, are they not supposed to go out and protest? Because if they go out and protest, the cops will start fucking with them. And then because they're fighting with the cops, random people will show up and start looting things and, breaking things separate from them and stealing stuff because all the cops are occupied. So it's like, do we just not protest then? Because that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, no, that's and just think about it like logically, right? The natural progression is the state oversteps. Okay, the certain people are made aware of that when it oversteps. They decide to try conventional means to try and recapture the freedoms that were taken away. And what's your next recourse? Like, if they're always going to respond with force, they always do, right? Like, that's what the state does. The state makes decisions, and then if you don't abide by those decisions, the next recourse that they have, and the only recourse, is force. That's what they do, right? And so, what's your answer? Oh, like, I thank you, Daddy. May I have another? Like, please beat me again. Like, no, like you have to fight back. I think it is important to go through the progression, though, right? Like, it can't just go straight from state overreach to riot, right? Like, there has to be steps along the way, because those steps along the way also help you build, like what we were talking about, like, the buy-in from the onlookers and from the people that don't think that they necessarily have a dog in the fight, but truthfully they do, because if it's not them now, it will be them eventually, right? But no, I think that's a good point. I think ongoing in the chat, there's like a conversation about, BLM's tactics and stuff like that. And like, look, you can take issue with their tactics and whatnot. There were some things that they did that I would not agree with. There were some things that they did that I had absolutely no problem with,
It's really important for people to know that there's multiple organizations sometimes within the same city, and that these organizations will hate each other sometimes and criticize each other's tactics. So like they'll view maybe Atlanta or something, and then like Saturday, a big group comes out and they block traffic and they're slapping on people's hoods and they're being assholes. Yeah. And then Sunday, a totally separate organization that they don't even fuck with each other and they actually hate each other will come out and do a completely different kind of protest.
Right.
I know that just for the fact that in Lansing, Michigan, there's 4 different BLM organizations, and 2 of which hate each other. In Detroit, there's 3. And that's just my state. There's a totally different BLM Grand Rapids that operates differently. So I think the BLM gets the same exact thing the Boogaloo does, where they are like a decentralized movement that have a bunch of different objectives. And like, you'll have a conservative Catholic preacher, black dude leading an event on one side of the country, and then you'll have like a black radical Marxist, separatist on the other side of the country, and then people are like, oh, well, they're both BLM.
Yeah,
where that's just not how it works. Like, it's way more decentralized, it's way more local, and a lot of the things people protest are local. Like the media makes it seem like every single event that happened over the summer was a George Floyd event. A lot of events were for people that were locally killed by police. And like they might have like a George Floyd sign or something like that, but if you listen to the speeches, they're talking about people like Anthony Hoolan, who was killed in my community, which was a white guy. BLM were protesting a white guy that was killed by cops. You'll go to Casey Goodson, you'll go to all these different states, and they're protesting their own local issues, but the media tries to make it seem like this giant national
monolith
mob all pushing for exactly one thing, and that's just not how anything works.
And I mean, obviously, whether it was planned this way or it just so happened to occur that way, it was it coincided with a presidential election, which is the highest profile, political pandering event that happens in our country every 4 years. And that was incentive to do it that way. I know I'm probably in lockstep with you, where like, look, private businesses, private property and stuff like that, I would not be in favor of people destroying those things or interfering with those. A police department or a federal court building, I mean, that's at least you're knocking on the right door, right? Like that you're actually in the right place. Like, we had the comment right before we went live, or I made the comment to you that, I appreciated, one of the things I appreciated about you in the speech that you gave in Lansing was you were in the right place. When the MAGA folks showed up to DC, like, they were in the wrong spot, right? Like, all those decisions that they had an issue with that happened in the election, they happened in state, at the state level. Like, we are a combination of states. We're not one monolithic country. And just the diversity of who we are as a country is ridiculous, right? Like, just taking that in perspective. But no, I agree with you. I think you and I wouldn't necessarily have an issue with at least focusing the either the anger or the frustration in the right direction, right? But look, it's a pressure cooker. Like, when people get in that situation, the key is, let's not let anyone get in that situation. Let's stop being authoritarian before all of that stuff has to end up happening.
Right. And like I said, like, it's just really hard for, like, people have never been to a protest, so they don't understand how much of a chaotic clusterfuck a protest is, especially once the police start like engaging.
Yeah,
we're like, you're 100 people and you're an organization, you're all in the same Facebook group, you're out there to protest police brutality, and then like 9,000 other people show up and you have no idea who they are or what their intentions are, and you're sitting there marching, and all of a sudden one dude you've never seen before darts out from the crowd and like punches a mirror off of a car. It's like, well, what are you supposed to do? Like they underestimate the kind of, like, not to be too dramatic about it, but it's the only concept I can tie to, like, the fog of war that happens, and like how there's so many people in different groups and everything's going on and it's chaos to where like, things go wrong, but you also have people that aren't protesters showing up to these events and causing problems. And you have, as Aaron pointed out in the chat earlier, like the police pretending to be protesters to cause problems. You have opposing groups trying to like delegitimize each other and cause problems with each other at these different protests, and like, it's a mess.
Yes.
But these comfortable normie conservatives in their farm out in the middle of Virginia, and then the urban liberal Democrats from their high rise, are looking down and have no idea what's actually happening on the ground. And that's why I had to go out and find out myself. Of like, what is Antifa? Who are the 3%ers? What are they doing? What are these events like? And everything I've seen does not match any media narrative, whether it be what Tucker Carlson is saying or Ben Shapiro is saying or any of those people, or what the Young Turks and what MSNBC is saying and CNN saying. Right. Like, a lot of people forget that the CNN headquarters in Atlanta was put under siege by BLM activists, and they were trying to burn down CNN headquarters. And even CNN was like, "Why are they here? We're on your side." And the protesters are like, "Fuck CNN." But if you ask like Tucker Carlson or something like that, he'd be like, Antifa loves CNN, blah, blah, blah. Now what's going on? No.
Well, look at the cognitive dissonance when right after the election, Antifa was basically destroying the Democratic campaign headquarters in Portland. And people were like, they were confused. They're like, wait a minute, shouldn't they be happy? Like, Joe Biden won. And like, Yeah, like no, you don't know, you don't get it. Like you don't understand. Like we might not agree with their tactics, or we might not agree with kind of the rationale, but we understand what they're saying. Like what they're saying is they, and so I maybe that's the common ground. The common ground is like when you see like to Aaron or whoever else is talking in the comments about like the back and forth and kind of like whether ambulances got through and what the tactics were and stuff like that. The answer is, once it all goes to shit, like all bets are off. Like you can't take the moral high ground once that stuff starts. The key is don't fucking get to that point. Like don't allow an authoritarian government to keep you under their boot and then treat you like two dogs in a dog fight where you think you got to kill the other dog when truthfully you got to kill your owner.
I keep using the analogy of like the left and the right in this country are like two people sleeping in being in a camping tent. And the government is like a giant bear that is ripping parts of the tent off and like slashing and causing giant wounds on both of you. And meanwhile, you're arguing over who gets to sleep on what side of the tent.
Yeah.
While this bear is just destroying this, and like the government.
I'll take less damage over there.
Right. And the government is spying on you. They're killing your activists. They're hypercharging the FBI. Like just on CNN today, the FBI interchangeably was referencing anti-fascist organizations in Portland with the rioters on the 6th and begging for more authority to investigate these groups. Like the state is just this unfeeling, unpolitical power monster that wants to kill you, and you guys are spending all of your time bickering over you don't agree with step 5 of my plan. While the government's not even going to let you get to step 2. It's going to kill all of you. So get it together.
No, it's the thing that we've been going through here in New Jersey right now is the miracle that is legalized marijuana in New Jersey now. And when you start to get into it, like the activists that are declaring victory, like you want to shake them and be like, whoa, hold on, like you haven't reached the finish line yet. This is like step 1. You got to keep going. But like you said, like every so often they just kind of give you a cookie, but the boot is still on your neck. Like, so you're like, oh, great.
And like we got medical marijuana, and then it was illegal again, and then we got it again, and then they made parts of it illegal, and then put like parts of it illegal again, and then we legalized the whole thing, but there's still a bunch of bullshit regulations that you can't do this, you could do this, and it's like people are like, yay, I don't have to vote anymore. Marijuana was legalized. And it's like they will find a way to make it legal, but not convenient or useful or recognizable to anyone whatsoever. Like if you look at government weed in Michigan, it's hilarious because of the regulations put on it. It's like 5% THC, brown, shitty looking, because that's what the government wants. Like
it's government cheese, just the marijuana equivalent of it.
Government cheese.
Yes, yeah. I'm gonna go smoke my government cheese now. Yes, that's exactly what it is. All right, so I want to ask you a couple questions. I want to be respectful of your time. We're going on an hour and a half. I don't want to keep you all night. So I want to ask you a couple of questions that are not political. They're like, or not necessarily political. But my first is, it sounds like you're a reader. You mentioned a couple of things that you've been reading, but like, what's your favorite kind of like genre or books or authors to read? And it can be political or not political.
Definitely, like when it comes to political, I'm really getting into Bookchin because I think he's really important for someone that's a right-wing libertarian or even a conservative to kind of look at what I would say is a non-antagonistic, really rational, really pragmatic version of leftism that I think you will find more palatable than you will ever imagine. And it'll probably get you, it might not change your mind to go from right to further left, but it might find ways to kind of steal those principles to apply them to you. Because when you get down to like the basic fundamentals of libertarianism and like more libertarian anarchist socialism, they both operate on the principle of communities and people like stepping up and working together to solve their problems, which that's something I think the average libertarian in 2020 and 2021 need to get better on, because we're kind of known as like the autistic like troglodytes that hide in our basement and scream about taxation is theft and everything and don't really go out, which is what the Boogaloo's kind of been perfect for, is like we're dragging libertarians out of like, hey, you should go like do a food drive or like a homeless shelter or like outreach or mutual aid, because if you're a libertarian and you're saying the government needs to step out of these programs, then you need to step into them. And people are not going to believe that you're going to be able to handle that if you don't step up now under this current system. and show like, hey, I'm a Christian right-wing libertarian, but I'm out here at this food drive. I'm out here at this, homeless blanket drive. Like,
yeah,
you have to step up. And I think Bookchin, like his idea of communalism really grows that. And then I guess nonfiction, I'm just a giant fucking nerd. Like I have like a Dungeons and Dragons book. Right? That's a Lord of the Rings poster up there. So yeah,
awesome.
I'm a big fan of like Tolkien, nonfiction, fantasy.
I love I'm a big sci-fi nerd.
Arthur
Love
C.
Lord
Clarke,
of the Rings.
all that.
Yeah, love Lord of the Rings. Love Arthur C. Clarke. There are so many nuggets in like sci-fi fantasy novels and works of fiction that are just hardcore voluntarist libertarian. Like the one analogy that is just will be forever embedded in my mind is that Donald Trump was holding the ring of power and he could have thrown it into the lava and he chose not to. Like that will forever be burnt into my memory.
It's totally true too.
Yeah.
Totally true.
Yeah, but okay. You know what? I just thought about something. Do you know Dan? I don't even know Dan's last name. I think his handle is like Dan for Texas. He runs the Taxation is Theft podcast.
Yeah. Okay.
Have you ever watched him?
Actually,
in Austin, he did the insulin sales thing.
He was the one we put on that organization with. His escorts were Boogaloo Boys. So
yes. Yeah. No, that was an awesome bit.
Because people are like, all their white supremacists and everything, but everywhere you see us is involved with the LP. Which, if you're a person that wants to make a conservative white supremacist state, then the Libertarian Party is probably the most inefficient and awkward way to go about it. Seeming like, literally, we have like naked men making out on the convention stage and stuff. But Supreme is one of the most popular libertarians, and he literally runs around with a boot on his head.
Yeah, but if you ask Brennan, we're lumped in with the white supremacists. We are a white supremacist organization.
A huge red pill to a lot of the more right wing libertarians that were like, "Oh, we need Brennan and we need all these people to crack down on Antifa, and it's a good thing that they're black bagging them over in Portland." And then 3 days into the Biden administration, Brennan's like screaming at the thing, "Look, these libertarians!"
Yes. Yep. Yeah. No, that was a huge red pill. Huge red pill. All right. Outside of the boog, what are your hobbies besides just reading? What are you into?
I'm a big I have a lot of hobbies. My actual profession is I am a commission painter. I paint things, so that's fun.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then I play video games a lot, obviously with friends. I like hiking. I'm a big outdoor person in the summer because Michigan we have hibernation, which is now, and then debauchery for 3 months when it gets warm out. I'm a big fan of that. I obviously like pretty much, I like reading. I write a lot. So that's kind of where a lot of my Twitter stuff comes from, is writings that I have in my speech and stuff like that. Awesome. And, guns, obviously. That's a big, big fan of the guns. And then just, kind of really anything. I'm very jack of all trades, master of none kind of individual. There's not a lot I won't find interesting. I was a huge music guy. I sang in choir. I used to be in a couple bands, but then lockdowns, I haven't gone to a concert in a year. I'm starting to get really itchy. Yeah.
What's your musical persuasion?
Oh God, that's even more all over the place. I'll go from listening to K-pop to crazy Scandinavian death metal to old school hip hop to EDM.
All right.
Everything.
that's what's funny is talking about destroying stereotypes. I would have sworn you were a Black Crowes kind of jam bandy kind of guy, but that's just because you look like Chris Robinson a little bit. But
I literally while I was walking home from the park, I went from listening to Mac Miller to a Japanese death metal band to Britney Spears to All American Rejects. That was my walking home music. So
you were a very worldly man. I appreciate that.
I just appreciate I don't, maybe it's because of my weird upbringing and how I've gone through so much, and I've lived in the inner city, I've lived out in the middle of nowhere, I've lived around communists, I've lived around traditional Catholic conservatives and everything. I've just found a way to appreciate what's good in everything, and because that's the other thing is I think the music is the perfect example of this. there's not a single album that I like every song on it, or a single band that I like even 90% of their music. I'm the kind of guy that has like one song from each band and then like two songs from each genre. And that's kind of like my politics almost are a mirror of that.
Yeah.
Where I'll work with conservatives, but not like neocons. And I'll work with like communists, but not like face the wall business owner communists. And I'll, like I find the good in all these movements and try to piece them together.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love that. Anyone who doesn't know you, where can they find out more about you or connect with you?
Okay, so I have a YouTube channel, which is just Magnus Panvidya, which I'm uploading more upon. And then every Thursday, I do the United Voluntary Podcast, which is me, a BLM activist, and an anti-fascist activist. And we just talk about pretty much what we've talked about, but being more specific on issues. Like last week, we did more of the police, like the FBI and the police grabbing activists and political prisoners. The week before that, we did mutual aid and teaching people about how to get involved in their community to like actually run a nonprofit and stuff like that. And then next week, our topic is people that die in police custody, in police, in prison or in jail, and mysterious die or commit suicide, look like they were thrown down a hill. A lot of those issues, and that's what we do. And then I'm on Twitter, which is where I'm mostly at, which is Magnus Panvidya as well.
Awesome. I would open the door to you. So I don't know, how familiar are you with blockchain?
I'm pretty familiar with all of the crypto nonsense. My upbringing was like in anonymous and everything. That was like my beginning of, so Tor browser and all of the cyber nonsense. I wouldn't say I'm super familiar with it. I'm not like a tech nerd, but I get all the concepts.
So we're actually in the process of building a Liberty-based community on the Hive blockchain. And so, the purpose being that, we're going to continue to be active on the conventional social media channels, but in the sense of redundancy and also decentralization and anti-censorship, that's where we're trying to kind of like simultaneously or in parallel build a community. And there's all kinds of possibilities there, as you could imagine.
Hell yeah! So when the hammer eventually comes down, we're not squashed out.
Oh yeah. And if anything, I mean, it will be it'll be a headquarters for the resistance, I think, is what it'll be.
That's what I wish we had with the Boogaloo in the beginning, because when we all got like the hammer dropped down on us on Instagram and Facebook, like there's still people to this day that I'm like rediscovering that I was great friends with, because we were just blown everywhere. It was like it was like some weird ancient myth of like all the pieces being scattered across the earth and you have to go and find them, because there's people, like we were so organized, we had so much going on, we had so many events planned, and we were really progressing, and then we all lost contact with each other, and that's only starting to build back up. So if we would have had something like that in the beginning, then maybe if things wouldn't have gone so fucking sideways for like 5 months.
Oh, definitely. We should work on it. I'll reach out to you. We'll you can even get on, like, you could create your own, Boog community, and create like a Boog coin, like a crypto token. How awesome would that be? Like
about it.
Yeah, go play some online poker and bet Boog coin with each other would be fantastic. I actually, next week, in this time slot next week, is a pitch for me, shameless promotion. I actually have the on the Hive blockchain, the longest running blockchain video poker, or actually like a poker game, has been running on the Hive blockchain, and the developer of it, I'm going to be interviewing her. So I'm going to try and rig it up so that we can actually play while we're talking, but I don't know how that's going to work on the how it's going to work on StreamYard. So I'll have to see how that goes. But fun. Yeah, so pretty cool. Look, I want to thank you. I appreciate it. I know you're busy. Sounds like you got a lot of things pulling you in a lot of different directions. But look, I love the fact that we were able to give you another opportunity and platform to be able to kind of, fight back against the misinformation that's out there about the organization. So
absolutely, I appreciate having me on, and I would definitely just, I'm always around. I always love just talking to people. Doesn't even have to be, anyone who's listening, anyone who listens to this future. Like I have open Proton mail. I just talk to random people all the time, because it's a lot of the things I'm talking about now I've been saying in my head for like years, and now I finally have someone who's like willing to listen to my bullshit.
Yeah.
So I get really excited to where like I've had conversations with Marxists and stuff like that. We're like, well, I don't really want to give you a platform, but I'm curious to talk to you. And I'm like, well, just talk to me then. Like this isn't about clout for me. I don't care about my follower account. I'm not trying to, get rich or get elected or something like that. I just like talking to people. So talk to me.
Yeah. Awesome. I would implore everyone, if you're watching live or recorded, definitely reach out to Magnus, follow him, interact with him. He's a good watch on Twitter. Like just hang out and see some of the stuff he puts out. It's absolutely fantastic. But yeah, I want to say thank you. Reminder, everyone, like, comment, subscribe, share, help us with the algorithm. And we will see you next week. Have a good night, Magnus.
Yeah, have a good one, man.